Hello everyone and welcome. Today we're going to be analyzing Sam Sulek's back day and specifically the biomechanics of his back day. What do I have to say about it? First off, who am I? I'm just a dude who likes to talk about biomechanics and teach biomechanics to other people. So hopefully you get something valuable out of this video. Let's just start it right up.
But I kind of want to start with pull downs first. Almost as like a pre-exhaust in a way. Because even though the pullover is sweet, I don't want to do the pullover when I'm perfectly fresh and strong, because it'll kind of take away from the emphasis of like the squeeze and the stretch, right? It's like, I don't want to start with overhead tricep extensions. I want to start with something a little more just classic and basic in a sense, and then move on to that real isolation work. Because it's almost like having the muscle pre-exhausted makes the movement more efficient with with lighter weight.
Okay, so ultimately, I think this is a really, really important and cool point that Sam is making, which is basically, in simple terms, he wants to do the lat pull down, the cable lat pull down before the pullover machine and before his other pull down machine. And the interesting thing to note here is that both the pullover machine and the pull down machine that Sam has, because I already scrubbed through this video, they are heavy in the stretched position. They're super hard in the stretched position, which is different from what we're about to see, which is, I think, just a regular lat pull down. The regular lat pull down is hardest at the bottom. It's hardest in the squeeze. So the comparison there that Sam just made was, I would rather do a push down motion before an overhead extension motion for the triceps. And I think the reason he used that example is because the push down motion traditionally is really, really hard at the bottom, meaning when you're squeezing your triceps. But if you do, let's say, a 2-arm overhead rope extension, that is going to be really hard in the stretch. So Sam is actually making a super interesting, I think, and valid point about muscle lengths and specifically training at different muscle lengths. And the conclusion of it is basically put the stuff that is more stretched focused after the stuff that is more squeezed focused. So in the context of back and back training, since that's what we're analyzing today, this would be doing something like a cable pull down or a cable row before a machine that you can make really heavy in the stretched position. And we'll look at the mechanics of those machines in just a bit. First of all, already love that Sam is strapping up. I highly support it. I highly advise it for anyone who's pulling on back day ever. Don't listen to anyone who says it's cheating, by the way.
Oh my gosh. Oh crap.
Okay, so a couple major things to analyze about this movement. I'm just going to use this set because this is a really good set, I think, to demonstrate a lot of the concepts. And what I'll do is I'll just mute this here so you don't have to hear all the grunting. Two things to notice about the technique. One is tempo-related concepts, and two is just what the joint positions he's using are. So number one, in terms of joint positions, he's using a wider grip. So although the lat involvement here is going to be tremendous and probably the rate limiter, there's going to be a fair amount of upper back involvement as well, just because the arms are wider. So what does that really mean? Well, a wider pull down like this will include relatively more of the rear delts and the teres major, if you're familiar with those muscles, compared to a narrower pull down, which might bias a little bit more of the lats. However, the lats, and you can tell this specifically in Sam's intent, I want you all to look specifically as he's about to pull. Watch where he's initiating this pull down. He's initiating this pull down basically in his armpit. And so what he's doing is he's almost squeezing his armpits in that downward direction. And for those of you who don't know, all of the lats, they kind of are this really huge fan-shaped muscle that runs like this. All of the lats attach into the upper arm, but they pull the entire shoulder girdle, meaning the shoulder blade, the collarbone, and the upper arm all simultaneously down together. So it's a really good cue to use and something interesting to see in Sam's technique, which is basically this concept of him pulling down and initiating the movement with his armpit. But as I just mentioned, because he's using a wider grip, he's not going to be able to really finish the movement as much with his lats, because when the arms are wider, you can see he kind of has to pull a little bit almost backwards. So you all see how his arms are almost ending up a little bit behind his body. And as he pulls, he's actually raising his chest up. So he's raising his chest up as he pulls. His arms are a little bit wider. So this will be a really awesome hybrid of both the lats and the upper back. Again, namely the teres major, the rhomboid muscles, the rear delts, as secondary movers, and I would say the lowermost portions of the lats are going to be the prime movers here, just because the lowermost portions, if I pause one more time really quickly, the lowermost portions are the ones that run most vertically, right? So if this is the direction of resistance coming from the hands, right, via the hands here, via the hands over here, the thing that directly opposes that most is the vertical lats, the lower lats, which again run straight from the upper arm down to the pelvis and also the side of the rib cage. So really, really awesome movement from the perspective of a blended motion. And again, as I mentioned, that key point is that Sam actually pulls his chest up a little bit. You can see he kind of rocks forward and then leans back. That's why a lot of the guys who are huge bodybuilders do this, is because they're basically making the motion less of any specific portion of the back and more of like a, hey, I'm just going to smash my entire back with one move. Now, that is the kind of joint mechanics and the muscle mechanics related stuff. Now, the other part of this is the tempo. So many people, I think, would intuitively look at this and say, oh, he's not really controlling the tempo. I think that's going to miss some of the nuance and important takeaways about this pull down. So watch what happens right from the first rep. So this is Sam's first rep. You all see how he's going to kind of yank out of the top. The reason that he's going to yank out of the top, and he has a nice slow controlled motion, at least to start with on the eccentric, the reason he's going to yank out of the top is because what he's actually doing is he's creating momentum in the weight stack. So I want you to kind of watch just what the pacing of the weight stack actually is right from that first rep. Watch how fast it moves out of the bottom, right? And then it kind of slows down. Hopefully you can see that a little bit toward the top. So he's initiating with a little bit of momentum so that he can make it actually proportionately harder in the top. It's a little bit counterintuitive, but think about it this way. The harder you pull, the harder the cable is going to pull back on you. And so in that top position, when there's less loading on the joints, just because of where the resistance is compared to the body, yanking in the top portion of the motion can be hugely beneficial because you're going to get so much weaker in the bottom. If you want to think about an alternative to this kind of style of pulling, it would be a much more slow and controlled thing. But in my opinion, it's actually really, really helpful to involve a little bit of yank in these types of motions. Think about a comparison, if that's difficult to understand, to a pull-up. Where do most people fail in a pull-up? They fail when they're just trying to squeak themselves over the bar. And so yanking out of the bottom is basically a way to create some more momentum in the weight stack, to make the top of the motion where the muscles are stretched proportionately harder, where you in fact are stronger, and as a consequence, make the entirety of the motion a little bit more challenging. So overall, the main points: tempo is kind of fast toward the top, slower toward the bottom. We went over the joint mechanics and the muscle mechanics stuff. And then lastly, what I would maybe just add on to that is I wouldn't recommend doing the whole yanking thing if you're not super confident or super comfortable with controlling the load more slowly, right? If you don't sort of know what technique you are going to try to use in the movement, if you're not, maybe you have some aches, some pains that creep up every once in a while, take it slower and then basically slowly increase your intent to do the yanking thing so that over time you can kind of grade exposure to that position and that motion at that velocity, so that you're not just basically, tossing the load arbitrarily under no control. Most of the people who are ego lifting do that, and I think that what Sam is doing, how intentional or not, I'm not exactly sure, I think is very, very different from what many people conceptualize as the typical ego lifting. So what Sam is basically describing is just that he's going to go until he can't use a full range of motion. And then once the range of motion starts to drop off toward that stretched position, he's basically just going to bang out any partials he has left. Just one thing before he actually gets started, I think is super relevant if you have a pullover machine, and maybe even if you don't, you'll find this interesting, is the pullover machine has basically two major anchors. There's the seat belt here and then the back pad. And what's important to know about a pullover machine is that a pullover machine works in an arc, which basically means that the handles are up here, they go from here, whoop, downward that way, right? An arc is basically just a semicircle, you can think of it that way, or a semi-oval. And so what happens is as this thing goes through an arc, the direction that the arm moves is actually changing. And as a consequence, the direction of the stability that you need to create is also changing. And so toward the top of the range of motion, when the arms are kind of here, we'll see it in Sam in just a second, these pads are going to be actually pulling Sam upward. So it's really important that he has a counterforce directly downward, aka the seatbelt. But toward the bottom end of the range, right when that arc starts to go this way, that pad is actually going to be directing in the direction of the arrow. And so what that means is basically the pad is pushing him in the bottom, it's pushing him forward. So what does he need forward? Well, he's got that seatbelt, but he also basically has you can't really see it from this angle, he has the ability to actually push himself backward into the seat which I'm not sure if he'll talk about that or not, but that's something that I also like in relation to a pullover motion. So the seatbelt here is really crucial for that upward portion of the motion, and then making sure that you're glued back into the back of the seat is really important for the bottom portion of the range. So let's just watch Sam go through a set here just to see what it looks like, and I'll maybe add some comments as he goes through it. Oh, and one more thing that I forgot to mention about the stability here is in this top position, if you do get all the way to this top position, these pads are going to be pushing backward, right? And this bench is here to push you forward. So in the top position, you really want to be focusing on upper back into this bench. In the middle position, when that load, again, you'll see it, is going to arc downward. You really want to be concentrated on the seat belt. And then in the bottom, as I mentioned, you want to be just make sure that you're absolutely glued into that seat.
Oh, yeah.
So hopefully you can kind of see that arcing concept, right? It's almost like at the top, it's forward, down, back, right? So you and your brain, whether you're leading with your elbows or your hands or whatever, you need to be thinking along with that arc of motion. You need to be thinking forward, down, back, forward, down, back, forward, down, back, right? You need to basically be paying attention to every little bitty portion of the range. And also, so watch what happens as Sam starts to lose range of motion, right? He's just cranking more and more of them out to the point where he basically just is doing, reps halfway down. I think that's awesome. And then he can barely get out of the top. So this is an exercise, if you remember what I said toward the beginning of this video, that's actually quite heavy toward that stretch position at the top. All right, so if you go back, watch where he feels. He gets kind of a full rep, or a close, start to lose a little range, and then he's done, right? So notice that, okay, let me just scrub back really quickly, compared to this, ready? So he gets full rep, a little bit less, a little bit less, a little bit less. It's like inching less, right? So it's like, on that motion, on that pull down type motion where it's heaviest at the bottom, where it's most challenging at the bottom, he's going to be able to bang out so many reps, right? Because it's easy at the hard at the bottom, super easy at the top, right? So a regular lat pull down, hard at the bottom, super easy at the top, like we talked about, which is why he was doing that yanking thing. But go over to a pullover machine, different pullover machines are different. He gets toward that end of the set. He gets a couple partial reps, but not really, right? There's nowhere near the amount of partial reps he's able to get in the pull down motion, where it's like straight from the top of the motion. He maybe gets a half rep, a quarter rep, and he's done, right? He's not able to bang out 10 more partials like he is on the lat pull down, or like he would be, say, on a cable row, again, because it's more challenging toward the top. And how that relates to my commentary earlier is specifically in the fact that these motions, the pullover motions and the one he's about to do, the pull down motions, they're very heavy toward the stretch position. Another thing to add about the pullover is that in terms of its difference relative to the pull down, the pullover will be a little bit even more of a hybrid, I think, between the lats and other muscles. So for instance, I mentioned that the teres major is a big contributor in the instance of a pull down motion. In the pullover motion, the teres major can probably contribute even maybe a little bit more. Of course, that can change depending on your intent, but just know that a pullover motion can also involve some of the pecs, right? So specifically the lower pecs, if we go back to this position, and I get my marker out here again, what is going to basically pull this arm forward is several things. Number one, of course, are the lats, which basically are going to run that way. The teres major was going to kind of pull like that. But the pecs, and specifically the lower portions of the pecs, right, this is where Sam's lower pec attaches. So it is also going to be able to contribute to pulling his arm forward from this top position. And to be honest, a lot of times I think the reason that a lot of guys arch or don't go as high up into the motion is because the farther back that you move, the higher up your arm moves toward your head, the less lats you're going to be able to contribute or have contribute to the motion. So if you want to make this even more lat focused, and Sam looks like he's arching a good bit, so he's making it pretty lat focused here relative to this exercise, what you want to make sure of is you want to make sure that you're not using too much range into that overhead position. I'd recommend maybe like your biceps kind of toward your eye level and then pulling straight down from there. So again, here is just another angle to basically see how that direction of the pad is changing. If I go back here, remember, toward the top, that pad is toward the eyes, and then it's down, and then it's back. So just remember, whenever you're doing a pullover machine or any other similar kind of arcing motion, that you are cueing yourself appropriate to wherever the pad is pushing you, and you're stabilizing in the appropriate place. Remember, in the context of the pullover, it would be toward the top of the range. The pad is pushing this way, so you better be smushed into this bench. Halfway down, that pad is going to be pulling upwards, so you need to make sure you're secured into the seatbelt. And then toward the bottom, just make sure you're secured into the seat.
And this is going to be a similar set to the last one. I want to squeeze and hold for a second, then get to the point where I can just do regular reps and then just burn out with regular partials. You know, I can't really, I don't think anybody would argue.
Super interesting, by the way. What he's basically saying is he's going to do a full range rep when he can pause in the shortest position where his arm's at his side. This is a pull down, by the way. And then once he can't get that pause fully, then he's just going to allow some movement without a pause. And then once he can barely do that, he's going to do the partials. It's a pretty solid way to do almost like a drop set within a set. It's like getting as much as possible out of a single set as you can.
Against it, right? But I don't take your form too seriously. Now, that's a silly thing to say. Obviously, take your form seriously. But I think what I really mean is, like, you know, if you're doing a regular ass straight set and it's a movement where partials make sense, like if you're doing leg press, you're not doing partials. You've got to go all the way up and all the way back down every time, and then re-rack it when you know you can't get one more, or have somebody like help rack it, or maybe two people, to make sure you don't get smushed, right? Same thing with like barbell bench. There's not much room for partials. It's just kind of full reps until failure. But with movements like pull downs or hamstring curls, or sometimes rows to an extent, depending on the machine, partials will make sense because you've got some muscle left in the tank, or some energy in the tank, to do even just minute reps. And just based on pump and fatigue, I know that those partials are doing something. So it's not such that I want every rep to be length and partials only, but I'm saying work up to that. Clear reps in the beginning, dirty reps toward the end. And by dirty, I just mean not complete, and maybe use a little body language to get them moving.
So I would disagree with that last part, just in the sense of I don't even think that it's a partial rep. I don't even think we should call it that, as if we should degrade in any way the value of the rep. I know what Sam's trying to communicate, and it's basically the exact same thing that we were talking about earlier, right? How the pull down, it's really light toward the top, so it's easy. So you can do a lot of partials there at the end of the set. It's basically just a simple way to think about it is like, okay, if the exercise is uniformly challenging, in other words, if the exercise's resistance is matched to how strong you are, you're not going to need to do partials, right? Even if you do, you're probably not going to be able to get any, or if you can, very few. So Sam gave the two examples of a leg press and a bench press, both of which you can't really bang out many partial reps once you're fatigued. You try to go to do the next rep after a really fatiguing one, and you're like, I just can't do it, right? Not to mention risk and other things like that. But as I mentioned earlier with the lat pull down, and we'll probably see maybe in this as well, because even though this looks like it might be heavy in the lengthened position, it still might be most challenging at the bottom, which again is why Sam is training in the way he's training. And I love the way that he's doing it, because I do it myself. It's my preference, it's my bias as well. Yeah, so I just want to point out that how heavy this machine will feel will depend so highly on how you interact with the machine. The way that Sam has it set up, and obviously you'll be able to tell just by the way he's doing these partials, is that it will still be hardest at the bottom. You could conceivably set this up in a way where you could make it super heavy in the top, but just by the way you manipulated, where you're grabbing the lever in terms of the angle, and also, whether you use the actual handle or not, or you add a different one on there, just your body position in terms of how low or how high you are, all those things will affect the mechanics of the machine and how heavy it is on you and how challenging it is as a consequence. The simple takeaway here is that if you're wondering, hey, how heavy is this machine at one point, do a set to failure, do it controlled, and just observe where you fail. If you fail and you can get a bunch of partial reps, guess what? It's most challenging at the bottom, like a regular pull down. If you fail and you get to the top and you're like, I can't even squeak a partial out after one big fatiguing rep, guess what? It's heaviest at the top. Very few pull down machines, back machines are heavy in the stretch position. So you would not be wrong to assume that most back machines are going to be hardest in the squeeze, just like a regular lat pull down or row.
Yay distance. And it'll kind of be a combination, right? Because I'm like, I want to get a good lat stretch in the top and then lean back and make the squeeze more of a row. You see what I'm saying? But I think this will be it.
So I think this will just be basically a little bit more of a horizontal version of the pull down that he started with. And normally I would recommend that someone like Sam and of Sam's strength use more stability, because he's just going to basically straddle this bench and be leaning forward and backward. But because it's the end of his workout, I think he's purposefully put it here. He doesn't really need a chest support or something more stable, because he's not using nearly as much load as he could if he did it first. So I think that's something that I hear Sam talk a lot about that I think is super useful, which is just this concept of exercise order and helping or using exercise order rather as another tool in your toolbox to figure out how to organize a training session. So again, just in reference to what he's doing now, he's doing now basically like an upper lat focused row. If I had to pick one tissue, two tissues that are really contributing most, number one is this upper portion of the lat. So for those of you who don't know, the upper lats they're called the thoracic lats. They kind of run at an upward angle like this. And so his arm, as you can see, once these lats run up, it's almost perfectly in line with that. And the resistance is pulling him in this direction. So these upper lats are going to be a huge contributor. And what you'll also notice is that Sam's spine, this is neither good nor bad, it's just context here, his spine is bending all over the place, right? So just watch specifically this portion of his back, kind of where the sweat is right there, and watch how much it rounds, arches, rounds, arches. So this will be an upper lat / spinal erector combination exercise. And because he's kind of pulling up and out to the sides almost, he's got some rear delts, he's got some rhomboids, he's got some traps toward that bottom position. So this, kind of even more so than the first exercise we looked at, is kind of like a horizontal version of it, but just to a greater extent, to a greater extreme. So this is like the hybrid of hybrids. This is almost like what the barbell row kind of wishes it was. So overall, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it informative. Please let me know, what do you think of this video style? Do you want me to do more reaction content? It's kind of all off the cut, so trade-offs to that. And also, please let me know, tag someone whose video you want me to go over, whose workout you want me to cover, whether it's a bodybuilder or some other fitness person. I'm happy to do commentary on pretty much everyone. I love breaking these things down for you all, especially if you enjoy them. And if you want to learn more about the biomechanics of lifting, check the links in the description below. You can learn from me directly in many different ways, free stuff, paid stuff, a combination. So just check the links in the description, and I'll see you all in the next video.